Welcome to the special edition of the Believer's Voice of Victory. We're Pastors George and Terri Pearsons. We're senior pastors at Eagle Mountain International Church and chief executive officers of Kenneth Copeland Ministries. Now, as you know, we have a general election coming up, and it is absolutely vital that we stand in faith for the United States of America. And we're going to be bringing to you some key information to help educate and equip you to vote.
You know, George, America was founded on Christian biblical principles.
That's right.
Yet many Americans, even Christians, are not aware of our nation's Christian biblical foundation. So we have to go back to our roots so that we can clearly understand the founders' original intent. And we have two very special guests with us today who will help us do exactly that. We're so glad, once again, to have David Barton, founder of Wall Builders, and Tim Barton, I think they're related, also president of Wall Builders, that are opening our eyes to information and really revelation of that information. Much more than just a history lesson. This is a look into that our nation sprang forth from the Word of God, which feeds our faith. And that's what we're looking for as believers.
Exactly.
So tell us what you have for us today, David.
Let's go back and review last week, because today what we're going to look at, we've been last week, each day we were looking at an issue, because we start in the book of Genesis, seed plot of the Bible. It lays everything out, so we can look at the election by going back and seeing what are the issues that are important to God. What are the things that he dealt with? What are the things he put up front and said these are important? And so that's what we did last week, was cover 5 of those. This week we'll cover 5 more.
Yeah, and really, to your point, recognizing the foundation of America being built on the principles of the Word of God, we were able to identify several things last week where the founding fathers had the very basic understanding of what the Word of God teaches. And we talked about, as you look at election cycles, we have the opportunity to choose what direction our nation goes, and we can choose to do things based on the Word of God or whatever culture is saying. Obviously, in America, we can study and see when we did it God's way, it worked so much better than not doing it God's way. But that's the reality, whether it's America or all of life. But we talked about going back to Genesis, when we see how God created the world. He created things on purpose, for a reason, and even in a sequence. And going back and reviewing what God did, maybe even why God did it, gives us context and understanding for what are we trying to do in America? What should we care about? How should we prioritize issues when it comes to what we are choosing for our nation? And we started off with, in Genesis 1, it starts off in the beginning, God. So you have to start with the reality of who God is. And we talked about it in the history of the world. Nations have generally gone in one of two directions. They either have a really big God or they have a really big government. You don't have both. And it's either my God shall supply all my needs or I look to the government to meet my needs. But usually the bigger the government, the less freedom. It tends toward communism, toward tyranny, despotism. And in America, the founding fathers recognized we have a different idea. We believe there's God. And we talked about that in John 1. It says, in the beginning was the Word. When God created, God spoke into existence. It was His Word. So it needs to be based on the Word. And that's certainly what the founding fathers were to do, basing it on God's Word. We talked about how in Genesis 2, verses 5, 2, verse 15, God even identified that the world was not complete until there was man, and man was put in the garden to tend and keep the garden, to take care of God's stuff, recognizing that's why we've been put here. The founding fathers, again, recognized it's our duty to take care of what God has given us. And now us as American citizens living in a constitutional republic, we have a stewardship that God's given us with our vote, with what we do in the nation. But then when we got into the issues we talked about in Genesis, when God made man, the author and father of life is God, and life was sacred because we were the only thing in creation made in God's image. There should be a value of life. And we talked about, for Christians, this is where it all should start. It starts with a value of human life. And if we don't get this issue right, none of the other issues are going to matter as significantly. You have to be alive for everything else to matter. So it starts with a value of life, but then not only did God make man, God made them male and female in His image. He created them. So we also have now solved the conundrum of gender, where in culture we are hearing all kinds of numbers for how many genders there are. No, the Bible made it real simple. There's only 2 genders. And so just walking through the sequence, not only does it say that God made them in His image, male and female, He created them. If you are looking, and this is from Genesis 1, verses 20 through, and then skipping ahead a little bit to 25, but God made a woman and brought her unto man. Therefore, shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And they were both naked, the man and his wife, and they were not ashamed. God not only makes male and female, he brought male and female together for a lifelong covenant relationship we know as marriage. The institution of marriage, and this is where, if we're looking at how do we vote, what issues should matter for us as Christians, we really haven't even gotten out of the first couple of chapters of Genesis yet, but there's so many issues that we are confronting in culture, like the issue of marriage.
That's why last week on every program, we went through the platforms. Because as you cover an issue, what do the parties say about that? Because you're going to put someone in office who will either advance those beliefs or inhibit those beliefs. Maybe both of them inhibit, maybe both advance. That's what you got to find out.
Right.
So they've told us what they want to do when they get in office. And we need to make sure that we just don't listen to the $1 billion of commercials that's going to be out there choosing the issues they want to talk about. We need to look at the issues God talks about and make our vote based on what God says. And that's why we look at that, including today with very simply the marriage issue.
Right.
And this is something that's not confusing in Scripture. The Bible has a lot to say about marriage. And really, even the idea that the man and woman were naked, they were not ashamed. Even the idea of human sexuality, God's also clear on the boundaries inside of sexuality, which in culture now, we're seeing people promote changing of the structure of marriage, changing the boundaries of human sexuality. But if we go back to Scripture, for example, in 1 Corinthians 6, 18 through 20, it says, flee sexual immorality. Every other sin a person commits is outside the body, but the sexually immoral person sins against his own body. Or do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you, whom you have from God, that you are not your own, for you have been bought for a price. Therefore, glorify God in your body. And this is dealing with the human sexuality issue. Again, this is a prominent thing, not just in culture, Dad, even as you mentioned in the platforms. This is something that the political aisles are split over the boundaries of what should be human sexuality. Of course, we have a culture that's promoting this more and more for rising generations. We're seeing the sexualization of kids. But again, in Scripture, it's so clear. In Hebrews 13:4, it says, let marriage be held in honor among all, and let the marriage bed be undefiled, for God will judge the sexually immoral and the adulterous.
You know, Tim, if I may inject something here, let marriage be held in honor. And I did a study on honor some time ago. And one of the things that I discovered, without elaborating on how I came to this observation, but God requires honor on the basis of the original source. In other words, when the Scripture says for the wife to honor her husband, what does that mean? It says because he's the head. Well, the Greek actually doesn't mean head like boss and dominant of. It means the source of, like the head of a river. You know, it means the beginning point. So he requires honor. Why do we honor parents? They're the source of. Why do we honor God? He's the source of. Why do we honor the Old Testament? Because it's the source of the New Testament. Why do we honor Jesus? Because he's the source of our new life. So when he says honor marriage, we have to go back and honor it as the way it was in the beginning. When Jesus talked about marriage, he actually said that. In the beginning, God created them, male and female, and he said, what God put together, don't let anybody put asunder. Street talk, what God put together, don't be messing with it. Don't be messing with it.
Well, and this is something that's interesting. If you go back in American history, which we're going to spend some time doing today, there was a Texas Supreme Court case from 1913. It was Grigsby versus Reap. And in this decision, the question of marriage came up. And this idea, to your point, of honoring marriage, recognizing the origins of marriage, the question was, what are the origins of marriage? Where did marriage really come from? And here's what the Texas Supreme Court identified about marriage. Marriage was not originated by human law. When God created Eve, she was the wife to Adam. They, then and there, occupied the status of husband to wife and wife to husband. The truth is that civil government has grown out of marriage, which created homes and population and society from which government became necessary. Marriages will produce a home and family that will contribute to good society, to free and just government, and the support of Christianity. It would be sacrilegious to apply the designation a civil contract to such a marriage. It is that and more. It is a status ordained by God.
Wow.
Now, That is entirely correct in their assessment, but it's so interesting that we are now at a place where you're seeing political parties saying we need to redefine and we need to change. The government should control. It used to be, we knew, marriage didn't come from the government, just like our inalienable rights. The government doesn't give us our rights. Government exists to protect those rights. Well, that's what marriage was. Government didn't give us marriage. Government exists to protect marriage. So now, when we see different politicians suggesting they should change it, well, if you didn't come up with it, you can't change it. That's not your idea. That's God's idea. But this is what we see so much in the culture, some of this cultural battle, is can we redefine, can we change what God has said? And this is why as Christians, we have to make sure we recognize our job is to uphold God's standard, is to maybe at times even defend God's standard in culture for a culture that's trying to change the very foundation of it.
Just as marriage is so significant, God also says, here's what I don't want happening outside of marriage. He puts sexuality within the bounds of a man and a woman in a lifelong union, and that's why it's not a civil contract. You can't break it. Jesus in Matthew 19, verses 1 through 15, talks about even no-fault divorce is not acceptable. That's not what God permitted. That's what Moses allowed. It's not what God permitted. And so you look at sexuality, and one of the other verses that deals with this is in Romans 1, and it talks about homosexuality. It says, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth and unrighteousness. For this reason, God gave them over to degrading passions, for their women exchanged their natural function for that which is unnatural, and the same way men abandoned the natural function of the woman and burned their desire toward one another, with men committing indecent acts with men." So homosexuality, this is something that has been dealt with a long time in the world. It's nothing new. If you go back to Blackstone's commentaries, we talked about him last week. He was the guy that had the greatest legal influence on the Founding Fathers, his 4-volume set. And he quoted from Ephesians 5:12, where it says, look, homosexuality, the Bible says, is an act not to be mentioned among Christians. So he wouldn't even talk about it. He said, I'm not going to talk about that act not to be mentioned among. It was so wrong. And then when you get to James Wilson, who was really a chief founding father in writing the Constitution, but he starts one of the earliest law schools. He's on the Supreme Court. And when he gets to homosexuality, he says, the crime not to be mentioned among Christians, I pass over in silence. Wouldn't even talk about it.
Well, I think he said not to be mentioned among men, not just Christians.
That's right.
Because this should be something nobody partakes in.
Nobody.
But it's interesting, going back to Blackstone and to James Wilson, both of them said, this is so shameful, we won't even talk about it.
That's right.
We acknowledge that this is a wrong thing, but we're not going to get into details on this because of how shameful this thing actually is.
And there was this book that came out in 1814. It's a 4-volume set, a law book on the laws of the Scriptures. And it points out that one of the reasons that homosexuality is so bad for a culture is with heterosexuality, you can repopulate, natural populate, but there is no way to naturally repopulate homosexuality. Therefore, you have to recruit. And it's a recruitment type of thing. And because of that, it's dangerous to society, because the only way you can exist is to recruit others into it. And they point out you always start young. You start with young children, with young boys,
well,
etc.
And part of their even recruitment strategy, they said it has to be a breakdown of the morals. You have to break down the morals of society to be able to recruit people into this. So you have to change objective standards of morality. You have to change where the boundaries are, and then you recruit people. And they do point out that often it starts with the young because maybe they're more susceptible to being drawn in to something that would be more immoral in that position.
And then these books, this is by a professor at Oxford and Cambridge, really smart guy, but he did these books in 1920s. And he went back through 5,000 years of recorded history. He looked at 86 civilizations. And he said, whenever you get to a point in a civilization where you reject what's called sexual regulation, in other words, he said, when sexuality is no longer confined to marriage, it's either outside of marriage, like adultery, or it's before marriage, premarital sex. He said, every single civilization within 3 generations has ceased to exist. Nobody's made it past that. So we started that with the free love movement back in the 1960s, and we're now looking at the 2nd, 3rd generation, and we're now to where that nothing's wrong sexually. If it can be done, it's legal, it's fine, it's okay. And at that point, no civilization survived. So I want to kind of wrap this by going back to Genesis, because Genesis is a seed plot. And if you recall, there was a time when angels, God says, hey, look, Sodom and Gomorrah, I can't tolerate this, going to have to take it out, but I can't do it until I talk to my friend Abraham. And so they go and talk to Abraham. That's when the negotiation, they have the auction. Can I do it for 50, 45, 40? And they go down. And so what happens is the angels then go to talk to Lot.
And to be clear, just in case somebody doesn't know the story, it's where God says he's going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, and Abraham says, but Lord, what if there's 50? Would you destroy it if there's 50? And then as you're saying negotiation, this is where Abraham is saying, but God, you wouldn't destroy the righteous with the wicked. And God says, okay, if there's 50 righteous, I won't destroy it. And then you can see Abraham processing, like, there might not be 50. What if there's only 45? Yeah. And God's like, okay, 45. What if there's only 40? And he gets all the way down to 10. And God says, if there's 10 righteous, I will not destroy the city. Well, Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed, which says a lot about,
not even 10.
Right, not even 10. And this is also where the angels go, and they're going to remove Lot from the scenario, knowing it's going to be destroyed. This is the setup leading into this in Genesis 19.
This is where you get the whole agenda, the LGBTQIA plus movement that goes today. So the angels come in, and this is the way it's recounted in Genesis 19. It says, the two angels arrived at Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gateway of the city. When he saw them, he got up to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground. My Lord, he said, please turn aside to your servant's house. You can wash your feet and spend the night and then go on your way early in the morning. No, they answered, we'll spend the night in the square. And that was very common. You do that in the Old West. When you went into town, you stayed in the square, or you could sleep under a tree or whatever. You didn't need an inn. It was always safe. You could do that. They said, we'll just stay in the square. It's what everybody else does. Every other town does. But he insisted so strongly, Lot said, no way, you cannot spend the night in the square, that they did go with him and entered his house. He prepared a meal for them, baking bread without yeast, and they ate. Before they had gone to bed, all the men from every part of the city of Sodom, both young and old, surrounded the house. They called to Lot, where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we can have sex with them. Wow. Now, notice, here is the demand of the sexual revolution. We want you to come participate with us. We're not going to leave you alone in your own house. We're going to make you come out and affirm us and be part of us. And you have to, and this is what we see in schools and what we see in politics and platforms. And so that's the demand of sexual revolution. So it said Lot went out to meet them and shut the door behind him and said, no, my friends, don't do this wicked thing. Look, I have two daughters who have never slept with a man. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do what you like with them, but don't do anything to these men, for they've come under the protection of my roof. Now, this is where he's trying to compromise with the sexual revolution, and he makes a stupid deal. Hey, I've got two virgin daughters. Take them and rape them all night. How dumb is that? But see, when you're trying to negotiate with something wicked, middle ground is still wicked. It's still going to be wrong. Sure. So when you try to negotiate with that LGBTQIA plus movement, you're never going to get acceptable ground. You'll never get there. They said, get out of our way, they replied. This fellow came here as a foreigner, now he wants to play the judge. What's that? That's a false claim. He's been living with them for years, and they've been living, but now he's trying to judge us, and this is where all
racist.
Exactly, and he's a homophobic bigot, and so you say, I'm not that, and so you go out of your way not to be what they accuse you of being, which is a false claim anyway. So they use false claims to move you closer to their direction, because you don't want to be that person, so you get closer. And it says, we'll treat you worse than them. They kept bringing pressure on Lot and moved forward to break down the door, but the men inside reached out and pulled Lot back into the house and shut the door. Tell me who's got the meanest coercions and threats. They say it's you Christians, you intolerant, you bigots, you what. No. The hate is on their side, and they're the ones forcing people to join with them, participate, and that's what we see in schools and others.
And this is also something that the same story was repeated again in Judges 19 with the story of the Levite. But you see the same idea from those promoting that kind of sexual behavior, sexual misconduct. And it's interesting, again, what we hear so often is, hey, we just want the same respect that you have, but you don't see that being pushed by the other side. You don't see, I mean, as Christians, right, as people that believe in traditional marriage, biblical values, we're not using the same kind of coercion. We're just saying we should uphold some kind of standard and not break down all standards. And yet what we are seeing over the last several years, now some of this has changed in the last couple of years because of the new judges that President Trump had appointed in his term, but what we've seen is an attack against people of religious faith if they didn't give in to this movement and coercion of some kind, whether it be be the bakers, the photographers, right? Jack Phillips from Colorado is a great example where, is it 4 times he's been charged?
He's won the Supreme Court case, and they keep suing him to make him participate in homosexual weddings. And Barronelle Stutzman, she had to lose her flower shop because she wouldn't do a homosexual wedding. And she said, "Here's all these florists. Don't make me do this. It's violent." No, you're going to do it. Yep. So the courts come after her. They come after the Kleins in Oregon, took their home away from them because they wouldn't bake a cake for homosexual. They're making you participate with their functions. They won't leave you alone. They're going to get involved, and that's the coercion that's there. And this is something our side's got to understand. You got to stand for what's right. When you start compromising, you're going to see where we are now, and that's the problem. So this is where platforms really come out, and you can see really clearly.
And seeing who takes what side in the issue, because as we already identified, if you go back, this professor from Oxford and Cambridge said, when you have a breakdown of sexual morality, when there are no sexual standards anymore, society collapses. And we have seen the breakdown of those moral standards. And so now, looking at, okay, who's going to do the best job? As Christians, we want to make sure that we are promoting biblical values. And certainly the idea of marriage as a man and woman and sexuality not being promoted to children in school, not literally in public schools where they're giving out condoms to middle school kids. I mean, unbelievable breakdown of morality. We should be asking, okay, who's going to do the best job of upholding a standard, knowing that neither candidate, neither party is going to be perfect, but can one of them take us a step in the right direction? So looking at the platforms, if we look here, first of all, at the Republican platform, it says Republicans will promote a culture that values the sanctity of marriage, the blessings of childhood, the foundational rules of families, and supports working parents. We will end policies that punish families. Now, we also know that when President Trump was the president, he did things like disallowing service by military personnel with gender dysphoria, meaning that we weren't going to pay for the gender transitions of people joining the military that thought they were a girl and really they are a boy. And now, under President Biden, the military is paying for these gender transition surgeries. President Trump said we're not going to do that. President Trump also has come out opposing gender transition surgeries for children. On the opposite side, in the Democrat platform, Democrats passed, and this is from their platform, it says they have passed Historic Respect for Marriage Act, although...
By the way, that's a great title, Respect for Marriage. Who wouldn't respect that? It means respect for gay marriage. And so the Respect for Marriage Act says, no, don't say this man and woman kind of stuff. This is any way you want to define it, anything you want to be. So the Respect for Marriage Act is a nice-sounding bill that says there's no limits on what marriage can be. If it's 2 dogs and a horse, whatever it is, you can have any combination.
There was even an application I read for one person who wanted to marry an animal.
Yes.
And then, of course, polygamy and...
there's no standards.
There's no standard and no limit.
Right.
Or no boundaries.
The Respect for Marriage Act is actually the Disrespect for God's Marriage Act is what it amounts to. We take what God said, and that's what we don't want. We want anything else.
You know, it's important to recognize, too, when you say 80-something societies all collapsed, but we're Americans, and we know how to do it right. That won't happen to us because we're better than everybody else, and so, therefore, this won't be our problem. But that's foolish.
It is. Foolish. And it's the idea... It doesn't matter who you are. God's standards are God's standards for a reason. The Bible says that everything that God commanded was for our good. And so when we dishonor marriage, when we don't uphold that standard, then we are setting ourselves up for a place when the Israelites were going into Canaan in Deuteronomy 28, and God tells them very plainly, you do it my way, you're going to live in blessing. You reject my standards, and you're going to be cursed everywhere you go. And the Democrat platform is very clear. They're rejecting the standard of marriage as a man and woman. They're rejecting the standard of human sexuality in the confines of marriage. And so the platforms are very clear on this issue.
Yep, absolutely.
I see that, too, that also Ms. Harris has voted and voted and voted and voted against marriage and for all kinds of...
For gender transition for young kids.
For kids, and voted for it. She's made it very clear.
No.
So that it's not the important. The platforms are important, but you also, when you have opportunity to see how a candidate has lived out those platforms, it is a double confirmation.
Absolutely.
To that.
Wow, this went very quickly today.
It's really quick.
Listen, I want to remind you of the book that we're offering, The American Story, Building the Republic by David Barton and Tim Barton. And this is a powerful tool for us to be able to familiarize ourselves with our founding fathers and the things that they believed and they said. This is tremendous, and I'm so glad that we have the opportunity to offer this.
Tell us, what would somebody gain by reading this book?
They would certainly learn more about the Christian foundation of the nation from firsthand stories. Most of the time, people know the names of like George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, but they couldn't tell very many stories, and certainly not the God moments of their lives. Yeah. And we include a lot of those in that book.
So this isn't just a collection of facts. It's got a human aspect and telling about how these were real people. Real people.
And that's why we called it The American Story, because so much history is dates, names, places. This is the story of the people.
That's good.
In the Bible, you don't know what year David killed Goliath, because that's not the important part. The important part is the story. And that's what we've done, is reintroduce the stories.
And Elijah was a man with like passions, the Bible says. Well, these were people with like passions, facing like challenges, and how they triumphed and produced the United States of America.
Yep. And we also want to include our voting booth prayer and confession card. You can take this into the voting booth with you. There's a prayer that you can pray. Very important that we do this. Very important that we vote.
So the information for the book and the confession card and how you can order yours is on the screen, whether you're in the United States or out. And it's a huge discount for this book. So I encourage you to follow that information and purchase yours right away along with the confession card.
Guys, thank you so much. This has been so rich today. And I'm so glad that we'll be back tomorrow.
With more.
Until then, remember this. God loves you. We love you. And Jesus is Lord over the United States of America.
Praise God.
Today, there are many conflicting worldviews about the foundation of United States of America and its founding fathers. Find out the truth from the stories of America's first 7 presidents with David and Tim Barton's book, The American Story, Building the Republic, and uncover the roots of where we came from. Journey through the lives of these presidents through actual letters, speeches, and first-hand stories that reflect their commitment to God. They were men who encountered God and sought to build a unique nation founded on biblical principles. Gain a deeper understanding of the Christian foundation of our nation through the God moments of their lives. This book will help you relearn the biblical foundation of our nation and discover the true American story. Order The American Story, Building the Republic by David and Tim Barton for only $22.99 on kcm.org/TV special or call 800-600-7395.
If we confess our sins, He is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. Period.
Join us for the California Victory Campaign, November 14th through the 16th. Register at kcm.org/CA today.
Welcome to KCM.org, your study center for victory. Click Start Here to unlock answers on where to begin your faith journey. You'll find links to our most popular content and an overview of what KCM.org can do for you. Start there and don't stop exploring. Find a Bible-believing church home with the Find a Church feature. At KCM.org, we want to answer your questions, encourage you daily, and help lead you on the path to victory in your family, finances, emotional, and physical health. With things to watch, read, pray, and speak, KCM.org meets you where you are.
Find out more about Kenneth Copeland Ministries and how we can help you grow in faith. Visit our website, kcm.org.